This podcast is proudly brought to you by MaximusMark.com and Enterprise Fitness. Search MaximusMark.com/radio for more great podcasts just like this one, or search iTunes Maximus Mark. Hey folks, it's Maximus Mark, and welcome to the show that punches you in the face with information, but in a good way. It's Maximus Mark Radio, and today's guest is what I would call nutrition royalty. She is the co-founder and president of the Weston A organization. She's the author of Nourishing Traditions, Eat Fat, Lose Fat, and has tons of articles published at www.westonaprice.org, where you can find articles on anything about raw milk, raw honey, cheese, vitamin A, what to eat when you're pregnant, plus a whole bunch of other topics. The website is a gift, and I know I spend many hours researching on the Weston A Price website when I need to look something up. So it is absolute pleasure to welcome to the show Sally Fallon. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I've been following Weston A Price for such a long time, since really I got into nutrition. So I'd love to get the listeners, catch them up to speed if this is kind of the first time hearing about Weston A Price. But before we get into that, how did you become one of the world's shining lights in health and nutrition today?
Well, I sort of almost feel like I've got dragged into it, kicking and screaming.
Oh, really?
I know. It was just the result of my own personal journey, where two things came together. First of all is my love of cooking and my, my devotion to really delicious, high-fat, high-cholesterol foods, which I love and love to cook. And then reading Dr. Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, that happened in the early 1970s, it's a life-changing book, and who showed that these are the very foods that kept people healthy and for generations. So I raised my family this way. I raised my kids with these types of foods. They were superbly healthy. And then when my youngest was in school full-time, I turned my attention to writing the book, Nourishing Traditions. And when that was through, we felt there was a need for an organization to keep looking at the science as it came out and to educate people on the principles of healthy diets. So that's when we set up the Weston A. Price Foundation.
Okay, so who was Weston A. Price?
He was actually a dentist in the 20s and 30s. He traveled throughout the world looking at healthy populations in order to answer the question, what is a healthy diet? And he mainly looked at people's teeth, and for him, the sign of good health was complete absence of cavities and absence of dental deformities. That means no crowded or crooked teeth. And that told him that the population as a whole was a healthy population. He took photographs and wrote up his findings in this book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which has been a very influential book for many people.
Now, mainstream nutrition don't really, I guess, like the work of Weston A. Price in a lot of ways, because it kind of really disproves a lot of, have 11 servings of grains a day. Can you just speak on that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. What Dr. Price found was very different from what we're being told is a healthy diet today. And of course, our healthy diet today is supposed to be based on all of these carbohydrates, not necessarily grains, but, mostly grains, mostly white flour.
Yeah. And
there were cultures that Dr. Price studied, looked at, that had grains in the diet, but these were whole grains, and in addition to that, these were grains that were prepared very carefully by a soaking or souring process, or in the case of people who ate bread, the bread was sourdough bread, which is a kind of fermentation. Because grains have a lot of anti-nutrients, even irritants in them, and as we're finding out today with all the celiac disease, and the proper preparation takes care of these components.
Could you also argue that grains back in the 1930s and 40s was a very different organism to what it is today with genetically modified?
Yes, it is. Yes, that's another point. I often make that with the celiac disease. Is it the gluten that's causing the problem, or is it all the hormones and pesticides and fumigants and all these other components that they put on grains? The typical grain gets 10 chemicals applied to it from seed to final product.
Wow. Okay, and is that worldwide, or is that just in the U.S. mainly that it gets?
That I don't know. It's certainly in the U.S.
Certainly in the U.S., yeah. A lot of people, I guess, again, might just be hearing of Weston A. Price organisation for the first time. What does it stand for? What is the Weston A. Price organisation all about?
Well, we are a nonprofit nutrition education foundation dedicated to providing accurate information about diet and health. We have no ties with the industry or with government. We focus in particular on educating people about healthy fats, and those are fats like butter, lard, tallow, the traditional fats that people use. Coconut oil is another healthy fat. One of the statements in our mission statement is the scientific validation of traditional foodways. So we feel, there's so much pro and con in the scientific literature. You can support almost any position drawing on scientific studies, but we feel that if we can show that the study validates the foodways, then we ought to take that study pretty seriously.
Right. You guys just had a Weston A. Price convention. I just saw on YouTube just before the Junk Food Man song. You can just tell us.
Yes.
Tell us a little
Please
bit.
Don't ask me to sing it, but yeah, the children did the Junk Food Man song at the end. Yes, we have a 4-day conference once a year, and we just finished our conference. I consider it the premier nutrition conference, really internationally in the world. And we have a children's program. We feature really delicious meals. And a varied agenda. People can hear highly detailed scientific talks, or they can go to cooking classes, or anything in between. Yeah,
that's fantastic. So one of the things I guess I heard you on another radio station a couple of days ago, campaigning with raw milk, and you were debating someone with raw milk. So that's something that you're very, I guess, heavily involved in right now. Before we get into the raw milk issue, what do you think are the major problems with the world's food supply, and why is something like raw milk, I guess, illegal?
Well, the food supply has been industrialized and processed, overly processed. And by industrialized, we start with the animals. The animals have been put inside, no green grass, no sunlight. So the 3 most important vitamins, according to Dr. Price, have disappeared from the food supply. That's vitamins A, D, and K. And these vitamins are necessary for utilizing the minerals and the other vitamins in the food. And so without them, the minerals and other vitamins pretty much go to waste. So that's one thing that's happened. Then it's just horrendous what we do to the food after that. The oil processing, the flour processing, the sweetener processing, and the food flavorings, and all of these are put together to make junk food.
Yeah, so I just really want to reinforce the significance of what you just said. So the vitamins, make sure we get this right, your fat-soluble vitamins, E, A, K, D, and E. Is that correct? And they help, they're synergistic vitamins for the absorption of all the other vitamins. Is that right?
Yes, it's A, D, and K.
Yeah, A, D, and K.
Vitamin E is important, too. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. But the 3 that Dr. Price looked at and found were in such high levels in traditional diets were A, D, and K. And where do we get these vitamins? Well, we get them from certain seafoods, not the skinless fillets, but we get them from shellfish, fish eggs, fish livers, fish liver oil, and in the land animals, excuse me, in the land animals, we get it from butter, cream, egg yolks, organ meats, and meat fats of animals raised outside on pasture in the sunlight. And these are the very foods that we're told we shouldn't eat. They've been demonized.
Yeah. So, why is something like raw milk, which is, quite a superfood, so to speak, why is something like that illegal?
Well, first of all, I need to stress, at least in the United States, it's not illegal to purchase, possess, or consume raw milk. It's only illegal in some states to sell it. And that tells you right there that the laws against raw milk are for economic reasons. They use health and safety as an excuse, but really these laws are there to protect the dairy industry and to prevent the dairy industry from having to compete with farmers selling directly and getting much higher prices for their milk.
Right. Okay. So it's another case of, I guess, food industry becoming government and making its own rules.
Yes, exactly. They're very tight. The FDA and the agriculture departments and the food industry and the dairy industry, and fewer and fewer people can actually consume pasteurized and ultra pasteurized milk, and the market for this milk is going down 1% per year. It has for 30 years. And eventually, isn't going to be anyone consuming fluid milk. They just won't be able to. So, but a lot of people have found that they can't consume pasteurized milk, but they do fine on raw milk.
Yeah, with raw milk, a lot of you probably get this question a lot, and probably debated this question a lot. But shouldn't we fear raw milk? Isn't it dangerous? How do you answer that question?
Well, it depends on where it comes from. I mean, raw milk from a confinement dairy, it would be dangerous. It would be quite risky. But raw milk from a small farm where the cows are on pasture, produced in clean conditions, this is an inherently safe food because there are components in the raw milk that kill pathogens and also that support the immune system.
What about the E. coli? That's another concern that always gets raised.
Yeah, well, when animals are pasture-fed, the E. coli goes way down or even disappears.
Right.
The pathogenic E. coli, yeah.
So it can't actually enter the when we drink it, it's not even in the milk.
Yeah, right. And the milk kills the pathogens. I mean, milk that's cleanly made, you can test it for pathogens, and they're not there.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's shoot to some, training questions on nutrition. The first question is, what's your thoughts on things like protein powders?
We're very much opposed to protein powders. They can be quite dangerous. The problem with too much protein is that it rapidly depletes vitamin A. And when you deplete vitamin A, you are prone to everything from immune disorders to cancer, to chronic fatigue, to all sorts of horrendous health problems that doctors don't know what to do about. And eating lean meat, egg whites without the yolk, skim milk, or protein powders, all of these practices have the danger of depleting you of vitamin A, and probably protein powders the most. See, if you're taking a protein powder, you can get up to 30 to 40% of your diet as protein, and you don't find that in any traditional diet. You find 20% is the maximum.
And how much would fat be?
Fat?
Yeah.
The fat varies from region to region. In the Arctic, it's up to 80% of calories, 80% fat, 20% protein. In some parts of Africa, the fat is about 30% of calories, and the remainder is carbohydrates.
Yeah.
But don't forget, the body can take carbohydrates and turn them into fat. That's what it does with carbohydrates. But the key thing is to get the fat-soluble vitamins, one way or the other.
So another thing that I guess always gets raised is, ketosis and diabetic. When you start promoting, a high-fat diet, are you able to, touch on ketosis and just explain to the listener why perhaps that's not such a terrible thing?
Well, ketosis is not the same as ketogenic acidosis, which is a very severe condition that happens with diabetics. So they're two different things. All I can say is that Price found no problems with the Eskimo population. No, it was eating this way. So one way or another, the body adjusts to it.
For sure.
And some believe that the ketones are a better fuel for our brains than the glucose.
Yeah, and it's because, the insulin and glucagon response, it stops ketones accumulating in the liver as well. So it doesn't become a problem. Yeah. Yeah. Two questions from Will Levy in Melbourne. He asked, would raw milk make a good post-workout recovery drink, or is the high-fat content, or is it too high, and or is it optimal due to the insulin response from dairy?
I think it'd make an excellent post-workout drink, and I would add some extra cream to it.
Extra cream.
That's what the athletes did in Switzerland, and I would not be afraid at all of a high-fat diet for athletes. That's what Dr. Price found with the athletes in Switzerland. They drank bowls of pure cream during their athletic contests. And there have been studies showing that you have a lot more stamina and strength with a high-fat diet compared to a high-carbohydrate diet.
Did they have the bowls of cream with anything?
This is what Dr. Price described. During the athletic events, they drank bowls of pure cream.
Wow.
So there wasn't any carb loading going on here.
Right, yeah, definitely. Is there any link with inflammation or autoimmune issues, even with raw milk?
Well, raw milk would, because it builds the immune system, would help with immune issues. And by the way, saturated fat is very supportive of the immune system. So you want the cream or the butterfat in the milk.
Right. Out of all the cultures, I guess, Weston A. Price studied, which one, are you most, or maybe the top two, which one are you most taken by? And is there a particular culture that I guess you model more from than others?
Well, I'm very interested in the Swiss culture. That was the first one that he visited because their chief foods were raw milk and sourdough rye bread. And they did have some meat and, meat and soups and things in their diet. But most of the calories were raw milk and the bread. And this is very interesting because you have the paleo dieters out there saying that the reason we have so many health problems today is we're eating these two foods that are new to the human species, dairy foods and grains. And yet here was a superbly healthy population that lived mainly on dairy foods and grains. Right. So our message is you don't have to get these out of the diet. You don't have to eliminate them. You just need to make sure they're the right kind of dairy foods and the right kind of grains.
Okay.
I think that's good news for people. We really don't want to be telling people they can't have this or they can't have that. Our philosophy is here's how. Here's how to eat fats. Here's how to eat salt. Here's how to eat sweet things. Here's how to eat grains. Right. And so you can be inclusive rather than exclusive.
Right. So in terms of just, I guess, to put a summary on the grain issue, it's not that you guys are against grains, but the mainstream grains, like the grains that I guess you buy from the supermarket is a no. But you would need to source better grains and then, I guess, soak them.
And then prepare them properly.
Okay, so you prepare them yourself, and making sure they're not genetically modified or any of that type of stuff. Yeah,
well, they need to be soaked or fermented or done into sourdough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's move to, I guess, butter, fat, and vitamin A questions. I heard that you put a stick of butter in your oatmeal in the morning.
No, that's not quite right. No. A half a stick.
Half a stick of butter.
Just a half a stick. It's about 4 tablespoons, yes.
Yeah. I actually make a shake after training that consists of raw eggs, raw milk, unheated honey, and raw butter. Now, people think I'm absolutely crazy for putting butter in my post-workout shakes, and I always explain that the high butter and the high fat is mostly medium and short-chain triglycerides, plus the vital vitamin A, D, and K, as we've already spoken about, that's in butter. But I guess in your words, I'd love to hear why is butter such a superfood? Well,
butter is just the perfect fat. As you say, if it's from grass-fed cows, it has A, D, E, and K. It's a terrific source of trace minerals. It has CLA, which helps you build muscle, and it has a great balance of fatty acids. Actually, only about 11% are the short and medium-chain fatty acids, but it's got arachidonic acid, which is critical for neurological function. It has, a little omega-3. It just has a plethora of fatty acids, and it has lecithin in it, which helps us use cholesterol properly. It has sphingolipids, which help digestion. I mean, you couldn't design a better fat, and it is just crazy that we have demonized this healthy fat.
So I guess one of the misconceptions is that if I eat butter, I'm going to get fat. What's wrong with that statement?
Well, butter supports thyroid function big time, the combination of vitamin A and iodine. So a lot of the times when people switch to butter, they lose weight.
Yeah.
I often say, it's what you put the butter on that makes you gain weight. So if you adapt this diet and are eating a lot of butter, you probably are going to have to cut back on the carbohydrates.
Right. And I think I remember reading Weston A. Price correlated the health of different cultures to the actual nutritious value of the butter. Is that right?
Yes, he was always testing butter from different parts of the world because he found a huge variation in the vitamin A and vitamin D content, and depending on how much sunlight there was and how much green grass there was. And this is the terrible thing that's happened with industrial agriculture. Unless you buy directly from a grass-based farmer, you're going to be getting butter from confinement cows, which is not a good source of A and D.
Right, yeah, it changes the structure. So
Yes.
I guess everyone's probably taken back and going, wow. So is butter one thing that you pretty much tell everyone to start to include in their diet?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And if you're very intolerant of dairy, you can use ghee.
Yeah, yeah. And most of the time, people, even if they have intolerance of dairy, butter's still okay because there's no protein strands in butter. Is that right?
Well, there's a little bit of protein in butter,
Yeah.
A little bit of milk solids in butter, but most people tolerate butter very well.
Yeah, fantastic. I just want to switch now to, I guess, raw food. I had both Jonas Vanderplant and Randy Roach, I think you know, on the show a while back. And they're both raw food and, I guess, raw meat eaters. From previous podcasts, I've heard you say you're a little concerned about, I guess, the raw meat phase or the raw meat,
Well, all traditional cultures had some raw animal foods in the diet.
Yeah.
So I do think we need raw animal foods in the diet. This can be raw milk, raw cheese, raw oysters. It can be raw meat. I'll tell you that raw chicken and raw pork make me a little queasy. I would never recommend that. So I think you eat those at your own risk. But raw beef and lamb are great. But what I'm concerned about is the all raw philosophy, because all traditional cultures cooked. Usually what they cooked was the plant foods, and most plant foods contain toxins that are neutralized by cooking. The grains definitely need to be cooked. And it's fine to have cooked meat and make soups and things like that. Potatoes definitely should be cooked. They contain a toxin when raw. And once again, I think people put themselves on these weird extreme diets that kind of separate them from the rest of mankind, and that don't necessarily do them any good.
Right, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, if someone wanted to get as strong as humanly possible, what would you advise them to eat?
Gosh, so I'm not into bodybuilding, so I would definitely have foods rich in vitamin D, because vitamin D is necessary for muscle, firmness, muscle integrity. So lots of shellfish, lots of butter and cream. Lard, I would cook in lard, which is a rich source of vitamin D. And
what's the difference between, I guess, lard and butter?
Lard is the fat of pigs, and it's a very rich source of vitamin D.
Yeah.
I would definitely include organ meats, liver at least a couple times a week. I mean, there were studies with animals showing that animals that got liver had a lot more stamina.
Right. Yeah, that's good. What's your thoughts on food intolerance testings when things like broccoli and beef are coming up as intolerant foods?
I'm a little skeptical of food intolerance tests because you get so many false positives. There's a pulse test that's described in my book, Nourishing Traditions, where if you're suspicious that a food is causing you problems, you go off that food for 4 or 5 days, and then you just eat a serving of that food by itself, testing your pulse before and after. And if the pulse shoots up, it's a sign that you have a problem with that food. I think that's a much better way of doing it.
Wow, that's a really easy way to do it. How did you discover that one?
There was a book written about it. I think it's called The Pulse Test, way back in the 70s or 80s.
Right, and is that a signal that your body's under stress, and that's why you're
right, and your pulse goes up. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really, really, really good tip.
Yeah.
So, how does one get involved and become a member of the Weston A. Price organization?
Just go to westonaprice.org, and there's a button there that says Join Now, and you can join online. Members receive our quarterly journal and all of our information alerts. We have a lot of members in Australia and quite a few local chapters in Australia.
Excellent. And is there a fee to join, or is it free?
Yeah, for overseas it's $50, and that just pays for the extra postage. In the U.S. it's $40, and students and seniors it's $25, and we'll honor that student and senior rate for overseas people.
Excellent. So the best place, I guess, to learn more about you is westonaprice.org?
Yes, westonaprice.org. That's WESTONAPRICE.org.
And your books, Nourishing Traditions and Eat Fat, Lose Fat, can be purchased on Amazon?
Eat Fat, Lose Fat is you can get from Amazon. Nourishing Traditions you can as well. But I would also invite you to visit my website, newtrendspublishing.com, which has not only Nourishing Traditions but the other books that I publish and my 2 DVDs. I have a DVD of my 5.5-hour seminar on traditional diets and a DVD called The Oiling of America, right, which is about cholesterol and saturated fat and the cholesterol theory of heart disease.
Excellent. That sounds really interesting. So I guess what's on the cards for the future?
Just keep on keeping on. We're really pushing for universal access to raw milk. Just educating as many people as we can. That was Dr. Price's dying words. You teach, you teach, you teach.
At this point in the game, do you think raw milk will become eventually, easy or available food?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think eventually this movement to get raw milk will be irresistible.
Yeah, and just from a consumer demand point of view, or do you think just a
consumer demand point of view, and the children getting raw milk today will grow up to be healthy and in charge. It's what we call the aristocracy of the healthy. And they'll make, if the changes aren't made now, they'll be made in the next generation.
Wow, excellent. So what do you have any final thoughts or things to sum up?
Well, I would definitely, if you're new to all these ideas, go to our website and click on a beginner's tour. And because the website is just enormous with so much information. But the beginner's tour will take you through some of the important articles.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, really want to thank you for taking your time out today and coming on and answering these questions. So thank you very much, and we wish you all the best with your campaigning for the raw milk and doing the world a service and a great deal of good. So really, it's much appreciated.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, bye. Have a good day.
All right.
Hey folks, it's Maximus Mark. Hope you guys enjoyed that interview. Just a reminder, you guys can find more great podcasts just like this one by going to www.maximusmark.com/radio or searching Maximus Mark on iTunes. Remember, I've got podcasts with Johnny Bowden, Randy Roach, Mark Schaus talking all about toxins. I did an interview talking about a number of hot topics. Jonas Vanderplant on raw food, Leah Keith about the vegetarian myth, Dr. Art Devaney talking about a caveman's diet, as well as many, many more fantastic guests. They're all at maximusmark.com/radio. And again, they're on iTunes as well. Do feel free to share these with your friends on Facebook and remember to tweet them as well. So until I speak to you guys next time, train hard, supplement smart, and eat well.